Hi, lawyer Per Gröndahl here. In issue number 9 of the year 2022 of the esteemed magazine Advokaten, my comprehensive work was prominently presented. This work involved an innovative internet-based digital tool that efficiently performs all necessary calculations and meticulously keeps track of relevant case law and applicable legal rules in the context of a typical separation case. I have previously recorded a video where I used this tool in consultations, mainly to find out whether it is possible for either party to keep the shared home and what can be done to achieve a positive bank loan calculation. I call this tool Min Nya Ekonomi. As mentioned, it performs all the calculations you need. It handles property division, calculates housing allowances, child support, and spousal support during the consideration period. It calculates housing costs, mandatory amortizations, and also creates a bank loan calculation. What I intend to focus on in this video is child and spousal support, specifically retroactive maintenance calculations. These maintenance calculations often go back 3 years in time because when cooperation with an obligated party has broken down, there has often been a long period of years with maintenance payments that were too low, so then you can go back all 3 years as allowed by the parental code. And these calculations can be quite extensive. Just as some input for those who haven't worked professionally with this. First of all, it's the parents' incomes and the parents' housing costs. With the help of these, you calculate a share that the obligated parent should pay towards the children's needs. That's one part of it. And the other part is calculating the children's financial needs. And here there are two different basic amounts, so to speak. One is from the parental code, where you calculate using a percentage of the price base amount. And the other, which has gained increasing influence in practice, is instead to use the Swedish Consumer Agency statistics, Koll på pengarna. When you use the latter method, the calculation of the children's needs becomes much more complicated. And I would argue that it's very difficult to manage all these calculations without a digital tool to help. If you look at an example, albeit a fictional one, but still adapted to reality. An example that spans over 36 months. And what you see there is that normally you calculate the monthly income as 1/12 of the annual income in these calculations. Then you get 4 changes in the father's income over 36 months. You usually get 4 changes in the mother's income and in the father's housing costs, since he typically moves around a bit. In connection with the separation, you end up with at least 3 different housing costs, and for the mother, the housing cost varies. If you imagine that she stays in the home, she will still have an increased housing cost once the division of property has been completed. Then we have the child support, usually paid to the mother during the first few months. If you consider the period from the separation until the divorce decree becomes legally binding, it usually takes about 8 months or maybe even 9. When it comes to the children's needs, the children can have 4 birthdays during that time, 4 different ages. Here, I'm assuming there are 2 different children. Their needs also include fees for leisure activities or preschool, and these vary depending on the mother's income, assuming the children live permanently with her. During the summer months, the children don't eat at school or preschool, but eat at home instead, and then their financial needs increase according to the Consumer Agency's standards. And during the summer months, the children usually stay with the father in this case for a few days, more than 6 days in total during the 3 summer months, and those days vary. This is quite normal and not particularly complicated or difficult, but it does indeed mean that you have to make over 60 different and distinct maintenance calculations. So what exactly does my new and improved financial tool actually do? Well, let me explain. The tool means you don't have to do the calculations yourself. You only need to meticulously fill in the specific inputs that require modification or adjustment, then proceed to carefully save the data for that particular month, and subsequently, the sophisticated and efficient tool will automatically take complete care of handling all the remaining intricate work for you, ensuring a seamless and accurate process. If we look at my new financial tool here, I can click through to the section that deals with maintenance. And then we see that there are 2 tabs here: financial information for mother and father and maintenance for the child. If I click on financial information for mother and father, that's where you calculate the share that the father is supposed to pay. I've set up all the inputs in a separate Excel sheet. And in that Excel, I've entered the changing inputs month by month. Of course, you could have all this on a bunch of different papers and read from various notes. But if you don't have all this gathered together and can't look at it on a single sheet, there's a very high risk that you'll forget something or make a mistake. Let's look at the financial information for mother and father here. And we fill in the basic information. That is what applies to month 1 in this child support calculation. And in this case, the father's income is 45,000 kroner. For simplicity's sake, we'll assume that the father lives in a rental apartment and after the separation rents a smaller place here for 4,500 kroner a month. Let's move down to the mother here. We should also mention that the father lives in a municipality in Greater Stockholm, and it's a municipality with more than 200,000 inhabitants. The number of children living with the father is 0, and so far there is only one person in the father's household. The corresponding information for the mother, she earns 35,000 kroner a month. The number of children the mother has to support is 2. Her monthly rent has been set at 14,200 kroner. I'm entering this as a rent amount here, although there are special calculation methods for condominiums and houses, but to simplify things a bit. She also lives in Greater Stockholm and her municipality has 200,000 inhabitants or more. There are 2 children with the mother, making 3 people in the household. The number of people in the household is very significant. When you look at these statistics, koll på pengarna, you'll see that there are household shared expenses, and these vary greatly depending on how many people are in the household. Now that we've filled in these basic details, we can see on this page that the father is to pay 84.03% of the children's needs, and the mother is responsible for 15.97%. Are we done with that? Let's now move on to the topic of child support payments. And we'll look at child number 1. Is the child 0, 11 months old? No. The child's age? Yes, this child is 9 years old. Does the child eat lunch outside the home on weekdays? Yes. And then we have costs for after-school care, and the after-school costs for this child are initially 700 kroner, because that's 2% of the mother's gross income. There are no other costs for this child. And so far, there is no visitation with the non-custodial parent. And are there more children? Yes, we answer to that. Is the child 0, 11 months old? No. How old is this child? This child is initially 5 years old and eats lunch outside of school. And then we've completed month number 1. In this 36-month calculation, we see that based on careful financial tracking, child number 1 should receive 4,454 kroner, and child number 2 should receive 3,180 kroner in child support, which totals 7,634 kroner. And since this is at the beginning of the separation, we also need to have a maintenance payment for the spouse, the mother. So we go to the Maintenance for Spouse tab and then press the button to turn it on. And then we see that in this case, the spouse should receive 4,533 kroner per month to balance out the surpluses. Now we have filled in month number 1. Then, when we need to manage all of this, we go to a tab called Maintenance Start. Here it says that you need to save a scenario. We click on Save. We can call this one UHB. Just a demo simply. Save it as it is. If we look at our first month here, we see that this maintenance calculation stretches from November 2022 to October 2025. We select the starting month here, November 2022, and we select an ending month, October 2025. And the first month for which we need to enter data is November 2022, and we save that month. And then we get a confirmation here that this has been saved. And we see a report appears here. We see what child 1 should receive, we see what child 2 should receive, we see what the spouse should receive, and we see the total amount here. Now it turned out differently. Different numbers than the ones I just mentioned, and that's because we've selected a different year, namely 2022. I think we had 2025 programmed in from the start. Specifying the time period here is very important for the calculations, because then the tool selects the correct price base amount and the correct tables for calculating the children's needs. It selects the correct child allowance. It selects the correct tables for calculating the maximum acceptable housing cost. You don't need to worry about those changes. The tool takes care of all that entirely. We can see in our summary here that for December 2022, nothing happens. There is no change through November 14th. Then I just click Save for the month 2022-12. I get a confirmation that it has been saved, and there we have the figures. Then when it comes to January 2023, quite a few things happen. First of all, we need to enter a higher income for the father. It should be 47,250, so we have a salary increase of 4 or 5%. We can also see that the mother has also received a significantly higher monthly income here, which is a very positive development. She has received a substantial amount of 36,650 per month this year, indicating a notable increase in her financial earnings. There are absolutely no other changes that month, so we can confidently proceed to click Save and finalize the record. And we get a receipt and we get the figures for January. Then for February, nothing happens. We click Save for February. In March 2023, the oldest child has a birthday. We look at the child's age, we click plus. It becomes 10 years instead of 9, and that's quite a big difference. Nothing else happens that month. We save that month, and if we scroll down and look here, we can see that the child support for the child who had a birthday has increased from 4,071 kroner to 4,523. We are going to carefully fill in the month of April, and then we clearly see that the father subsequently moves to a significantly larger residential property, and his housing costs here consequently increase to a substantial 7,250 kroner, which represents a notable rise. That's also when the children start having visitation with him. And here we need to fill in the total number of children the father is supporting, D2. Here it should say 2. Those were the changes that happened in April. Now we can save the month of April. There were no changes in May. We save that. In June, something happens. There will be changes regarding the children. At that point, the children are not eating lunch outside the home. We answer no to that question. Regarding child number 1, the question here is whether child number 1 stayed overnight for at least 5 consecutive days with the non-custodial parent. We answer yes to that. And we state that the visitation lasted for 20 days. Regarding child number 1, child number 2 eats lunch outside the home. No. We also answer yes to this important visitation question, and we are pleased to confirm this. And we have stated that child number 2 stayed 10 days with the parent responsible for child support. And we simply click Save 2306. Now we see that the maintenance amounts here have dropped to 2,341 kroner for child 1 and 2,341 for child 2. This also affects the maintenance to the spouse, because when the father is to pay less child support to the children, he should pay a bit more in maintenance to the spouse, since the divorce decree has not yet gained legal force. Let's look at the next month here. This is July 2023. Then what happens is that the oldest child spends 8 days, and the younger child spends 10 days with the parent who is liable for maintenance. We fill this in regarding the children. And the younger child was still there for 10 days. Okay, we save that month. Yes, and this is how the work continues. You only change the inputs that need to be changed for the month you have in front of you, so to speak, and then you click save when you've made those changes, and then you get a complete record. If you want to go back and thoroughly review what specific inputs you had recorded for a certain particular month, you can simply click the load button right here. For instance, we can easily go back and carefully examine what financial data we had entered and stored in November of 2022 as a clear and relevant example. Then we see that I had, for example, 45,000 kroner and so on. And if you want to remove that month and redo it, you click on delete. So if something isn't quite right for a month, then you load it by clicking on load. Then you go in and make the change. And then you click on save. But once you've made all these entries, then we can see what it looks like. I have saved this here. So now you have all 36 months. And we can see here that the maintenance payment to the spouse's period typically ends in the months of June, July of the year. After that, it's 0 kroner. But here we have the maintenance payments to the children and to the spouse for all 36 months. And the app totals up. As you can see here, the amounts for the children and the total amounts for everyone. And you can also, if you want, print out the documentation for each month. But that would be a lot of paper. This overview, you can download it as an Excel file. If I click here, there it is. And it looks like this. And there you can also enter an amount that, the total amount that the person liable for maintenance has paid. And that is then deducted, so you get a net amount to pay after that adjustment. So I've now shown how to use Min Nya Ekonomi to make this kind of maintenance calculation. And you could say that it probably takes less than an hour at least to enter all this information. And to produce this, the comprehensive calculation for all 36 months, and my professional assessment is that it would have certainly taken at least a full, dedicated day's work to meticulously perform all of these roughly 60 individual maintenance calculations and diligently keep track of all the various tables and essential input values that were absolutely needed. I sincerely hope you find this information genuinely interesting, and if you wish to know more about this or are keen to try using this application, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. Thank you for watching.